I've got a couple of questions, but I'm hoping that it's okay, that the conversation just travel where it goes. So if there are things that you think about that you want to add that aren't specific to the question, please feel free to elaborate. My real purpose here is that I want students to encounter you as scientists and understand the process that you use to create this beautiful map. No worries. We could pause. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, there it goes.
Oh, good. Phew.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
awesome.
Awesome. Okay. Phew. All right.
That
So my
happened to me
first,
last week as well, so sorry.
no worries. Don't stress. I have the same dilemma. My first question is actually, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you're currently studying? I don't actually know all that much about what brought you to CSUMB.
Sure, I can get started. So I am originally from Virginia. I went to Virginia Tech for my undergrad. I majored in biology. During my undergrad, I did a lot of research with the entomology department at Virginia Tech. And so when I graduated, a graduate student that I'd worked with in the past was doing a postdoc at UC Riverside doing tree fruit integrated pest management research. And she was looking for lab techs, and I was still kind of on the fence about whether I wanted to go to grad school or not. And so she reached out to me, and I moved out to Riverside. And so I did that for a year, and then I decided that I definitely was interested in going to grad school. And I wanted to kind of broaden or shift a little bit from biology. In the course of getting my biology degree, I was always more interested in the kind of ecology, almost like macrobiology kind of courses, more so than the like cellular and traditional biology courses. And so I applied to a couple environmental science master's programs in the state of California, and I met with some of the faculty here at CSUMB, and I really liked all of them. They were super nice. I really liked the focus of the program, and so that's how I ended up here at CSUMB. So I'm doing getting my master's degree in environmental science.
Sweet. Sarah, would you be willing to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm here from California, but Southern California, a small town called Palmdale. Um, I was interested in learning more about environmental science, so I had researched a few different schools on where I could, pursue that. And I saw this school, and honestly, I just really felt like it was a good fit for me. Close to the ocean, lots of natural areas nearby, to kind of go ahead and get experience being out in the field in. So this was, one of my main schools that I was interested in, and was happy to be accepted here.
Sweet. That's awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you were both here at CSUMB. It's really an honor for us to have you as leaders on our campus. So thank you. Can you tell me a little bit about how you started thinking about this project? So after we had the first pitch of, hey, we want to create a map of pesticides and their toxicity in Monterey County, how did you first start thinking about the project? What were some of the things that came to your mind or that you thought about as you were beginning the project? And maybe Sarah, we'll start with you and we'll just alternate.
Yeah, so getting involved in this project, I was kind of relating it back to and thinking about an environmental justice class I'd actually taken the semester previously. And I was just super interested to kind of see as we moved along how this would relate, like how looking at pesticides are going to, be related to where certain demographics are living at, how it's looking at near the schools, and then where that just might kind of be. It really interested me, looking at that perspective as we were getting into it.
Cool. Thank you so much. How about you, Lucas?
Yeah, so when I first started this project, a lot of my GIS experience in the past has been classroom based or more of it was like very focused, this is what we're doing. And so I was the one time that I did a project more similar to this was in the advanced GIS class I took with Dr. Olson. And so it made me, think of that and the process that he kind of suggested for us when we were doing that class, which was just a very open-ended, like you go into that class, you can do any kind of project and he's there to kind of give you a guiding hand. And so I was glad that John was also involved with this because he is a wizard when it comes to GIS. He's a really great mentor. And so, I think with projects like this, when it's a little not open-ended, but there's not a one set clear right answer, it's important to kind of think about the overarching goal because it can be easy to get kind of stuck in the weeds and there's like so much data and what do we want to include, what we don't want to include. And so early on in projects like this, I can tend to like get just really bogged down and overwhelmed. So I like to always just think about like, what is the goal? What is the end product we want to have here? And then after that, just taking stock of all the data that's available. This, like many projects, it was like, there's so much data. How do we decide what to use and what not to use? So I like to take stock of all the resources that I have. And then, based on the overarching goal and all the data that's available and the tools that are at my disposal, I come up with a way that I would personally maybe approach them. And then after that, when I have a clearer goal in mind, then I like to talk to other people about what their ideas are, brainstorm with other people. I had a lot of great meetings with both of you and with Dr. Olson and with the folks from EWG. That really they were really eye-opening and made me kind of rethink some parts of the project. And so yeah, I think it's important to kind of get that input from other people so that you don't make mistakes that other people have already made in the past.
I really appreciate that. I actually think the collaborative part of this process has been really encouraging to me. I wanted to ask a huge favor. So my next question is, can you describe the stepwise process or method that you used? And I'd like you to frame it from the standpoint of both using the kind of technical expertise and jargon that you might use, but also maybe if you could follow that up with an explanation for someone who maybe knows nothing about ArcGIS, because I'm thinking about our students and the fact that they will be coming to this brand new. So maybe if you can use your technical language, but then also help translate that into something that the everyday audience would understand. So maybe Lucas, we'll start with you. Could you tell us about the method that you developed?
Yeah, definitely. Here, I pulled up the document I wrote to kind of guide me through here. So basically, I started with the raw PUR data, the pesticide reporting data. And so that data set, basically just so Monterey County is split up into 1 mile by 1 mile square blocks. And so when pesticides are used, then their use is reported based on what block it's applied in. And so all of this publicly available PUR data, it's a humongous spreadsheet. I mean, tens of thousands of entries that basically goes through and it has the pesticide used, what block it was used in, and how many pounds of the active ingredient were applied. And so I took that data from 2019 through 2022, and then using R, I wrote up a script that kind of took in all of this data and combined it so that I just had one giant table. And then with that, we took the pesticide toxicity indices that were developed both by EWG and ones that were developed by Corin and your team. And so then we could apply, the toxicity index is on a scale of, I think technically there isn't really a hard cap, but I think generally it was from about 0 to maybe 5 or 6. And so that number was, multiplied by the total pounds applied so that you could get kind of a weighted value for the toxicity pounds applied. And so then after that, the point of that was kind of to put all of the pesticides on the same scale because there's so many pesticides that are applied and they all have very, nuanced, this one can cause problems here, this one can cause other health problems. This one is not a very big concern. This one is a very, very big concern. So it was weighted so that it could all kind of be in on the same scale. And so from there, once all the pesticides are on the same scale, then I just went through and so then the table would have the block that it was applied in and the total weighted pounds. And then using the R script, it basically compiled all of it and condensed it so that it added up all of the weighted pounds that were applied in each block, so that you could start with all the raw PUR data and the toxicity indices, and then end up with just one nice, neat table that was just each block that had pesticides applied in it, and then the weighted pounds of pesticides applied in that block. So that was all the R work, and then exported that as an Excel file, and then opened up ArcGIS Pro. And so in there, let's see, so we started with the blocks, the COMTRS blocks that the PUR data is based on the application within each of these blocks. And so there are publicly available shapefiles for these blocks. And a shapefile is, so when you're working with mapping data in ArcGIS Pro, there are different formats that the files can come into, or that the data is kind of presented in. And so a shapefile is just any file that is a polygon. So just like a general shape that you put on a map, like for instance, maybe you have a map of the US and you want the outline of the state of California, you would bring in like a shape file that is literally just looks like a shape of the outline of the state of California. And so so there are publicly available shape files for the COMTRS blocks that the PUR data is kind of based on. And so I uploaded, or I guess I downloaded that publicly available data, input it into ArcGIS Pro so that I was just looking at a map of Monterey County divided into a bunch of tiny blocks. And all of those blocks had kind of some metadata attached to it and other attributes, including the name of the block, or I guess the identification code. And so then when I had the map with all the different blocks, and each block had kind of its unique identifier attached to it, and then I also had this Excel file that had the unique identifiers and all of the toxicity weighted pounds, then I was able to bring the Excel file into ArcGIS Pro and join it with the shapefile. And so then each of the individual blocks with their unique identifiers was given, or the toxicity weighted pounds was kind of attached to each block. And so then with that, we were able to kind of get a rough visualization of how many of the toxicity weighted pounds applied in each block based on how we symbolized the map. And so we could, go in and change the map so that we could make the different blocks like maybe a deeper shade of red if it had more toxicity weighted pounds of pesticide applied in it, or a lighter shade of red if it was lower, so that you could get kind of a scale. And so from there, that was just the general how we got the pesticide weighted pounds data into the map. So I know the last time that we met, I guess a week ago now, we showed you maps that we made with the census blocks. And then we just had a meeting with John that I think might tweak the process a little bit, so that the data is kind of attached to the different fields, that the cultivated fields and pastures that are in each in Monterey County based on NLCD data. And so yeah, and that method has not been 100% fleshed out. I'm still working on that. But the first part about bringing in all the toxicity weighted pounds data, that's unapplicable to any method.
That's an incredible process to hear you describe. It's really helpful to me for you to illuminate kind of those steps. Sarah, I know when we met last week, one of the pieces you had talked about was some of the work around the identification of schools either as those single points or the polygons. Could you share a little bit about your process? I know that Lucas shared data with you. What were your next steps? What did you do?
Yeah, so far what we've done with everything we've developed so far, my process has been similar to Lucas, is going and downloading open data from Monterey County. They have like a catalog with GIS data. So I downloaded some of that information to import into ArcGIS. Some of these layers were, points that show public and private schools, also just like the county boundary to like outline for the entire map, and also major cities that'll go ahead and like show the names. That way I can show the names for each city within the county. So I brought all of those in to ArcGIS, and I basically followed, for the most part, everything that Lucas just outlined to develop that map. So, also importing his files that he had shared with me. So the co-meters blocks, as well as the Excel sheet for the total weighted pounds of pesticides. And then just following that process through. For the maps that we showed last week, what I did was basically calculate zonal statistics. So it's basically just like looking at the mean, right? And allowing you to then have an idea of how much pesticides were applied per block, and then how Lucas was saying, symbolizing that, showing it the different colors within the map. So it's called graduated colors in ArcGIS, but it lets you show it from, A to B. So like in our map, it's light to dark, a light, yellow color to dark red to symbolize which areas had the most pesticide application or in toxicity. And I also just like played around with making different layouts, which is what ArcGIS calls like the maps that you're going to export to share with others. I've also been working on since then making polygons, so shapes for each of the schools. So changing those points into shapes, like showing the actual like boundaries of each school. Which to do that, you basically just in ArcGIS make a new like a feature class is what it's called, and then from there you're kind of just tracing the outline of the schools. But I've also used parcel data from Monterey County, and a lot of that actually matches with the school points, which has been helpful. It kind of makes the process a little bit faster when it does. You can just trace the outline of the parcel that the school sits on.
That's super cool. I feel like one of the things that's really interesting to me is the extent to which there are so many layers in maps that I now appreciate thanks to the work that you're doing. So I really am thankful for your willingness to share about that process. Can you share a little bit about some of the challenges that you encountered along the way and maybe how you addressed those challenges? Do you have a preference on who goes first?
I don't mind going first this time. So for me, a couple of challenges, like one would be just the finickiness of ArcGIS Pro. I took a class last semester in it, so I was kind of aware of this already, that the program's kind of notorious for crashing if you're running large processes. So that's been a thing. It's not too bad as long as you make sure to save as you go. So just in case you do try and run something or the program just gets overwhelmed and freezes, that way you can, open it back up and start back right where you left off. So that's one challenge. And another challenge that I've had is like as I'm basically digitizing the shapes for the schools, some of them within from the open data, like there are points, but it just says unknown. So then I have to like go and cross-reference like Google Maps, Google Earth to try and figure out, okay, what is this school? What's the name of it? Is it even open still? Which a few weren't, which I had to find from the California Department of Education, which was interesting to kind of look through and see that, hey, this data that was published, updated a year ago is a bit out of date still.
Yeah, I think that's just a problem. Like, when you're taking a GIS class, all the data that's provided to you is perfect and it all works awesomely and it's meant to, but then when you're working with data in the real world, publicly available data, it's never perfect. There's always humongous problems and holes and things missing and stuff that doesn't make sense. And so that is definitely that's always a problem or maybe a challenge when doing a project like this. Another thing for me personally was that, like all the maps I've made in the past have been for an academic audience or for a class. And I've never worked on a project where the intended audience was the general public. And so that's been cool. Just like it's kind of viewing a project in a different way, making something that, you want something to be helpful and accessible to all sorts of people. Like, maybe in the previous maps I've made, it was really cool where there were like all sorts of stuff going on and crazy legend, and there was so much information packed into it. But to just an audience, that's not always the best idea. Sometimes it's best to kind of keep things straightforward. You have one map, you know exactly what you're looking at. And so that's been just a little bit of a challenge to kind of reframe the way I'm thinking about this project, thinking about the way that final maps are going to look for a new audience.
I really appreciate those challenges. I feel like wrangling big data in our world is always something that has some slipperiness to it, because sometimes you really do actually have to think about where there are holes or how to, as you described, Sarah, find information that maybe in theory is up to date, but in actuality is not yet up to date. So I thank you for contributing to that process and our understanding. My next question for you is, I'm really curious, what did you learn as a result of participating in this project? And maybe if you can you differentiate between knowledge and skills? So my guess is that we always learn by doing. So maybe there are aspects of this project that you learned conceptually, but maybe there are also skills that you gained in the process. Could you share a little bit about that?
So for me personally, it's been cool to talk to people like Brenda and Asa and the folks from EWG who are kind of part of worlds that I've never really interacted with. It's been cool to talk to them and understand their expertise and the things they talk about. And so it's been cool to learn about things like reaching pesticide toxicity and how that's determined and what sorts of groups determine that. I've worked with pesticides in the past doing entomological research, but more on the pesticide application and not so much on the toxicity and how it can affect human health. So that's been really cool. As far as new skills, I think there are some, just in talking with John, talking about using ArcGIS tools that, maybe I've used them in the past for other projects, but then, the deal with a software like ArcGIS Pro is that it can do so many things. There are so many times when I've like just randomly stumbled upon a tool that I thought, oh my goodness, like if I had had this 3 months ago, it would have saved me 6 hours of work. And so I'm thinking about how different tools can be used in different ways, kind of thinking outside the box when you're using software like that. So yeah, I don't know if there's any brand new skills I've used, but it's just been kind of using skills and tools I've had in the past in a new kind of different way. And that's all been done through, brainstorming, talking to people, learning about their experiences.
Thank you. Sarah, how about you? What are some of the knowledge and skills that you've gained as a result of this project?
Yeah, so similar to what Lucas was saying, it's just been super interesting to, talk with experts in the field and EWG who kind of develop or who did develop the method that our methods are based on. And just learning how, like, what is a toxicity index? How do you create that? How do you figure out which pesticides are worse than others? So that's been super interesting to like be a part of and learn about. Um, so far as skills, I feel like working on this project is helping me to get more acquainted with and kind of hone in on working with ArcGIS Pro. I'm pretty new to it. I basically just took one class last semester, and have been playing around with it. I had like a month break over the summer and then was working on it in July for a different project after not really touching it for a minute. And it it was a moment. It took me a moment to get back into it. And as I'm working on it now with this project, I'm like, oh, it's not as complex as it felt before. You're getting more at the hang of it. And like looking at the methods when I first read them, I was honestly a little like, what is happening here? um, but now I'm understanding it more. So I'm happy to, be able to develop my skills while working on this project.
That's super cool. I'm glad to hear it. I feel like experiential learning is invaluable, both in the like layering of knowledge and in the like gaining a skill, but also revisiting that skill. I feel like it's a little bit like, yes, you learn how to ride a bike, but sometimes you have to like remember, oh, yes, that's right. My feet go in this direction and my hands go in this direction. So I appreciate that. I feel like that's one of the cool things about learning. I'm super curious. Were there questions that surfaced for you as you did this work? Are there things that you're wondering about or curious about because of engaging in this project?
Yeah, so for me, as I've been working on this, like the past few days, I've been working on digitizing the schools. And I'm seeing schools that are like the back of it is bordering an agricultural field, or it's really close to, an airport is right next to it. And it's just a little surprising to see, visually. Like I know they're there, I know that exists, I've heard of this, I've read studies on this, but actually seeing the proximity between these things, it's just surprising. And it's making me wonder, like, why is that? And is there anything that could be done to, alter it, expand those borders between places where the public or children are at, um, from these other areas that are known to be linked with health issues? So that was one of the main questions that has been surfacing for me.
Yeah, I think in relation to the PUR data, I have been wondering about, yeah, is this data that is, being used by legislators and governments, or is it just kind of collected just for the sake of being collected? Like what other uses does this data have? Um, but other than that, questions, yeah, I can't think of a whole lot of other questions. Yeah, I'm sorry. I wish I could give
No,
you a better answer.
there's not an apology. I feel like some of it is there's different phases in a project, and sometimes, right, you probably have asked a lot of questions that you've answered yourself in the process of developing your method or in the process of refining or honing the map. Um, so I feel like questions kind of surface and then get resolved. And so there's probably a whole bunch that you've answered because of the kinds of sciences that you are. I'm really curious, can you share a little bit about what your next steps are professionally? What do you see on your horizon or something that you're working towards? Like when you think about next steps for you, what does that look like?
Yeah. So I am getting ready to graduate at the end of this coming year, barring any crazy unforeseen circumstances. But I've been, so I'm kind of starting to pivot to the mindset of like, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do after school? I've been thinking about going and doing more school and maybe PhD. But no matter what, if I don't do that, if I work, I'd love to keep working with GIS and spatial data. I think it's all really cool. And I think that like this, that is actually directly applicable to a lot of real people, is way cooler than stuff that just kind of stays in the confines of academia. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that is just, made by academics for academics, and it's kind of feels like, what's the point of this? So I like work that actually reaches the general public and can help people. So I would love to be able to, whatever path I take, I'd love to be able to keep.
Appreciate that. The ability to help people is something that I aspire to too. How about you, Sarah? What do you see on your horizon?
So right now I'm just working on finishing my bachelor's degree. I'm again hoping to graduate spring of next year. After that, I'm considering grad school, so I am planning on applying to a few different schools this fall to see if I get in for next year. If that doesn't work, then applying for jobs within the environmental science field. Um, I'm not 100% sure what like my dream job would be, maybe working as an environmental scientist with the state of California. They have a variety of different positions and areas you could work in, and that's kind of where I'm hoping to get my foot in the door. But I'm also very interested in continuing to work with GIS, and I have seen that the Bureau of Land Management has positions with it, so I'm kind of curious to see if that's something I could do as well after graduation.
That's super cool. I didn't have this question prepared, but it's bubbling to the surface for me, so I hope it's okay. If you were to tell the next generation of scientists, right, who are coming behind you, and make recommendations about maybe the things they want to think about or something that's important, or if you have any advice you would give them, what would you say?
Man, so personally, so when I was in high school, I wanted to be a doctor. I was going to go to medical school, and I went into my undergrad to major in biology, so that I could go to medical school. And I was taking all sorts of chemistry classes, and there was probably like a year period at the end of my freshman year, beginning of my sophomore year, where I was like, I don't know if I want to do this, but I felt like I was already so far along, and there was no way that I could change my mind, and it was set in stone. And I got into entomology because one of my friends was working in the lab, and they were recruiting just some summer work hands on the farm. And I thought, that's better than just working at a grocery store, which was my job at the time. And that made me really fall in love with working outside and more of the ecology side of science. And it kind of like, looking back on it, I think that's like, how could you be a sophomore in college and think that it's over? Like, you picked what you're going to do and you can't change it. Like, I feel like even now, like going into this program, I was like, this is my last degree. I'm never going to go back to school after this. Like, it's done, it's over, this is it. And then now I'm halfway through and I'm thinking, oh, actually, I don't know. Like, I took some hydrology classes and hydrology research as well as this, and that's really cool to me. And maybe I want to do that. And so just keeping an open mind and not being afraid to change your mind, and just following whatever is most interesting to you, and just believing that, like, in the end, looking back, it's all going to connect and it's all going to make sense. And just knowing that that yeah, even if you feel like you're on a path that you are 100% dedicated to and you can't waver from it, if there's something on the side that catches your eye that makes you think, oh, that's really cool, I want to explore that, then that can be really helpful, even if it ends up just being like a small thing that doesn't really materialize in anything permanent or long term. It's just a gain to broaden your horizons and get a lot. I feel like I've gotten a lot of different experience in a lot of different disciplines in science, and that has really made me like a better scientist and like a better thinker. So I guess that's the advice I would give to younger folks.
Awesome. That's great advice. How about you, Sarah? What do you think? What advice would you give?
I would say to somebody who's interested in maybe pursuing science, um, you know, stay open, take your time, and just be curious, honestly. Like that's one of my favorite sayings is be curious about, the opportunities that are out there for you and not necessarily shutting something down just because it sounds a little bit different than what maybe you were expecting or wanting to get into. Just like being on campus, there's so many different opportunities, clubs, organizations that you can get involved and volunteer with. There's so much to do, and in doing so, you're meeting other people and learning other perspectives that can kind of influence you and help guide you on your journey to reaching what you want to reach. So yeah.
That's incredibly wise advice. I plan to take it myself. Thank you so much. So my next steps, just for you all, is I'm going to take these notes and put together the ArcGIS story map. One of the things that I would love to ask from you is, could you send me screenshots of your process? So, for example, Lucas, when you were describing what you did with the R coding, a couple of screenshots that would help visualize that for someone if they've never seen what our studio looks like would be great. Or Sarah, when you're describing how you put together a polygon, so any images that you would be willing to share with me, I would be super grateful for. And then I will share the story map with you because I would love your feedback. So that'll take me a little bit of time, I think, to put that together. So I'm hoping that we will get you the rest of the Monterey County data, and then we can update our map, and then we can stitch it all together. So my goal is to have the rest of the Monterey County data to you all by the 30th of August. That's, I think, a reasonable deadline for us to power through the rest of the chemicals that are above 100 pounds. And then I was thinking maybe because of just the start of the semester for you all and everything that's going on, maybe we could plan a meeting the first week of September. Would that work for your respective schedules? To give you a little bit of time to take the data, update the maps, and then have a chance for us to take a look at the story map together. Would that work for you, or would you like the second week of September? What would work best for you?
So as I mentioned, we